Hi everyone, and welcome to a sunny, windy and bitterly cold garden. It's Tuesday, April the 6th I'm filming this, and we've had all kinds of weather over the past few days. Saturday was beautiful sun, blue skies. Sunday started to get a bit colder, a bit more wind. Yesterday was really windy, and the cold started last night. Tonight we've actually got -4 forecast, which it's not exceptional for winter, but for April it's definitely cold. And there's a chance that a few plants might be set back a bit. So what I've done is I've used frost protection fleece to cover the gunnery, just poked it inside some large pots so hopefully it doesn't blow away. Some plants like the Aces, the Tetrapanax will probably have to take the chances really. They might be set back a bit, they might look a bit of a mess for a while, but ultimately the plants themselves will bounce back and it shouldn't be enough to kill anything off. So today I want to look at a plant that is more summery and probably one of the mainstays of my summer tropical planting scheme, and that is Colocasias, like this bulb here. How I'll get them started, a few growing tips, and a couple of my ideas on the right plants to grow for your garden. It's crazy that I'm filming a video on Colocasias when it was actually snowing quite heavily just a couple of hours ago, but obviously it's not settled. That's British weather for you, anything can happen, and even in these days of global warming, patterns might shift and we might end up having later springs due to the cold weather. So, Colocasia Escalante then. These are tender plants, which means that I won't be planting them outside until, say, early to mid-May. There's plenty of time for them to grow and get big, and they will grow pretty fast once the soil's warmed up, but they won't really take the frost outside before then. The bulb or the tuber might survive, but the new growth will get frosted off. So you're better off getting them started either inside, on a windowsill, in a propagator, or in a polytunnel if you wait till maybe the back end of April when it's warmed up a bit more. So this variety then is an Escalante, which is a common green form of Colocasia. You can actually buy them from greengrocers as taros or edos, or you can go on eBay, they are pretty cheap. I actually bought a few big tubers around the size of a swede or a turnip a few years back, and one thing that you might know, or you might learn pretty quick, is that the size of the tuber doesn't necessarily correlate with the size of the leaves it produces. And the main reason people grow these plants is for the massive elephant ears leaves. Some of them can get really big, and unfortunately it can be the case that you can buy a really big turnip-sized tuber and the leaves are actually maybe a foot, 30 centimetres across, whereas a small plant can throw out leaves that are really big out of nowhere. It's just the way it goes. In terms of overwintering then, I always used to dig up my Colocasia Escalante around late October time, just before the first frost, and I used to pot them up, bring them inside, put them in our conservatory, which was more of a greenhouse to me at the time, and keep the soil a bit on the dry side over winter. You don't really want to encourage the growth, and too much moisture combined with cold conditions means that they rot away. But last year, due to space constraints, I've only really got one end room and a polytunnel. I actually tried dry storing them, and all I did was dig them up, chopped off all the growth at the top, chopped off all the roots, shook off all the soil, and I just left them on a bit of newspaper in a room without heating in the house, and that's where they've been all winter. So I decided that when spring came round a couple of weeks ago, it was time to get the Colocasias actually growing again, so they could produce a decent sized plant ready to be put outside in early May and not get completely lost or eaten by slugs. So what I did is actually follow a method that Yorkshire Chris has done a video about. Essentially, you get a plastic bag, put the Colocasias inside it, and he actually blows into it, which the idea of that is to create a bit of humidity. Personally, we've already got a load of pink lights in that end room, and the neighbours are probably thinking weird things as it is, so if I start blowing into bags in front of the window, it's not going to look good. So what I did is just dripped a bit of water into it from the tap like a normal civilised human being. But essentially any method of creating that humidity in the bag will work, and the goal is you want to get enough water in there to get them growing, but not enough to rot them. So I think as a general rule, if you haven't got a propagator or anywhere really warm to put them, then I would either breathe into it or just drip a tiny bit of water. If you started them off inside a propagator or somewhere really warm, like near a boiler, an airing cupboard, near a radiator, then you can maybe get away with a bit more water. And then what you want to do is seal that bag up, and hopefully over just a few days you'll start to see the shoots and roots appear. Hopefully at that point then, if everything's gone well, a couple of weeks later you should have a tuber similar to the one that I showed you. And if it is starting to get a bit mouldy, you need to keep an eye on these really every couple of days. If you start to see a bit of mould, take the tuber out, wipe that mould off, let it maybe dry out a little bit, put it in a new bag and start the process again, ideally somewhere warmer. But if you're starting to get the green showing and the roots coming out, then it's time for you to plant that up in some nice compost inside. And when you're planting it into a pot, you don't need to go to a big pot, just something small, just to give enough compost those roots to grow into. And when it comes to depth, I don't think it's really crucial, but ideally you need to aim for maybe an inch or so, maybe 2 inches, 50 ml of soil above the top of the tuber, and that'll give enough room for it to grow up through and plenty of compost for the roots. And I definitely wouldn't plant them outside yet, certainly won't keep them in a pot outside. They need to have some protection, and even in a polytunnel greenhouse it's going to be too cold at night, even with a bit of heating. Ideally they need to be kept inside, treated like a real tender plant, and given warmth to encourage them to actually grow before they get planted out. A few planting or growing tips on Colocasias then. It might look sunny now, but behind me there's a big snowstorm just about to head over, and I don't want to be out here when it gets even colder. So, Colocasias then. They're one of the few plants known as elephant's ears, and that's for fairly obvious reasons. The leaves get absolutely massive. And they work really well with other tropical tender plants like your Enseti bananas. The big tropical foliage, the massive leaves, they really complement each other. And practically, I find it easy to grow these kind of plants together, because you know then come autumn that you're digging up that section of garden, you know that everything needs overwintering the same way, and also practically you're not disturbing the roots of other plants that stay out all year just to dig these up. So I think from a practical point of view and a design point of view, these plants work really well together. They're a great plant to plant around banana plants. The leaves don't get too tall, but they just surround the base of it to really add that jungle atmosphere. The other great thing about growing Colocasias with your banana plants and other tender tropicals is that they've all roughly got the same care requirements over summer, and the first of those is a good rich soil. All these plants will pretty much grow in any soil, but if you have a moist soil, if you have a rich soil, then they'll grow so much faster, and the growth they can put on just through July alone is absolutely incredible. And the best thing you can do at this time of year is to spread a mulch over the top of the soil. You can dig it in if you want, it's completely up to you, but if it's easy to leave it on top, let the worms do the work, then absolutely go for it. Manure is really good, and I actually spread a lot of manure in the garden at the back end of last year. However, you can still get on with it now. It's still got a good 6 weeks to settle into the ground before you put the plants out. And having that rich soil gives these plants plenty of nutrients, and it will save you having to feed the plants as much over summer. So once you've got that good rich soil then, you maybe sprinkle some chicken manure pellets on, it's time to give your Colocasias a feed. And personally, I use liquid seaweed. I mix a really strong mixture every couple of weeks, pour it all around the base of the Colocasias and the bananas, and they seem to respond really well to it. So that's my top choice, but ultimately the main thing that you can do is to improve the quality of the soil. Any fertiliser is basically just the cherry on the cake. Is that a saying? Cherry on the cake? Icing on the bun? Whatever it is, fertiliser helps a bit, but the main focus should be improve the soil, get a good rich soil, and pretty much any tropical plant will grow well in it. So Colocasias then, they're a tropical plant with real impact to add to your summer garden display, and there's lots of different varieties available. You can get them from a lot of different retailers, but a few things I'll end on. Firstly, it's easy to be seduced by all these crazy looking varieties with purples, pinks, and what you tend to find is they can be slower to get going from tubers. If you buy these plants from, I won't mention any names of retailers, but certain retailers that ship them into the UK, you often start with a very small tuber, and it can take a while to get that into a plant that has any kind of impact. You know, you might end up just getting a plant like that big within a couple of months. And the other thing with the more fancy varieties is that they can be tricky to overwinter. So you might struggle to overwinter them dry, you might have more problems getting them started, and if you try to grow them on potted as a house plant somewhere cooler, they can rot off really easy, or in my experience anyway. You might actually be better off now, if you're looking at Colocasias, waiting another month or so and buying them as a plant. So retailers like Turnip Tropical actually sell them as plants, and they're not that much more expensive than buying a tuber without all the hassle, the chance of it rotting away, and having to wait a couple of months for it to get going. Someone else has done all that hard work for you. So personally, if I was wanting to add a more unusual variety to my garden, that's what I'd do. I'd wait a bit longer and actually buy it as a plant. However, my top pick, if you're wanting to buy Colocasia for your garden this summer, is Pink China. And that's because, well, quite a few reasons really. It grows really well and it can produce a decent size in our UK summers. So you're not getting a plant that promises leaves that are maybe 2 meters tall. I've had some of those varieties in the past, and even in a conservatory they got to maybe 1.5 meters, and that's with all the care I could give them. So if you wanted a plant that can actually grow successfully outside, in realistic temperatures, pink China is my choice. It gets a really big clump, it has these beautiful pink stems, big leaves, everything you want from a Colocasia, and it can also be left outside. So if you give them a decent mulch, then they can survive outside pretty much most UK locations, and they actually spread really well. Which is obviously that theme running through my videos, how you can buy 1 or 2 plants and make multiples. Pink China is my pick for that. Pink China then, it works really well with my summer tropical planting. So the Musa, the Ensetes, the Gunneras, it's a fantastic plant and I wouldn't be without it in my summer garden. So thanks for watching, I'm going to get back inside because it's absolutely freezing. See you soon.